The wind screamed across the frozen hills. Snow blew sideways like tiny knives. The human man, Ethan, pulled his torn jacket tighter around him. His ship had crashed 3 hours ago. Now smoke rose in the distance, and his fingers had gone numb. He couldn't feel his feet anymore. The cold wasn't just cold, it was biting. Cruel and endless. He stumbled through the icy land, each breath painful in his chest. His boots were broken, and the snow kept slipping inside. He didn't know the name of this planet. He only knew one thing: it would kill him by nightfall. Ethan tried calling for help, but his comm was dead. The antenna had snapped off during the crash. He tried to build a fire with broken wires and plastic, but nothing would burn. Even his emergency heater had cracked, leaking useless sparks. He sat down beside a snow-covered rock and closed his eyes for just 1 second. Then he heard its soft footsteps, crunching through the snow. He opened his eyes quickly, heart pounding at first. He saw nothing. Then she appeared, a girl, not human, but not fully alien either. Her skin was pale blue, almost glowing. Her hair was silver like moonlight, tied back in braids. She wore heavy furs stitched together with plant fibers and metal thread, and in her eyes, large and violet, there was no fear, only calm. Ethan reached for his belt where his tool blade had been, but he'd lost it in the crash. He stood up slowly, hands open. "I don't want trouble," he said quietly. The alien girl tilted her head, not understanding. She looked him up and down, saw his shivering hands, his frostbitten skin. Then, without saying a word, she turned and walked away. Ethan stared after her, confused and alone again. But just as he was about to give up and sit down in the snow forever, she came back. She motioned for him to follow. At first, Ethan hesitated. Was it a trap? But the cold gave him no choice. He followed her through the icy rocks, his legs weak and slow. After a while, they reached a cave hidden behind a frozen waterfall. Inside it was dark, but warm, not from fire, but from insulation layers of thick fabric. Moss and fur blocked the wind. In the center of the cave was a strange bedroll, long and wide. The girl pointed to one side of it, then lay down on the other side. Ethan's eyes widened, unsure what she meant. She patted the space beside her and spoke a word in her own tongue. It sounded like share. Ethan slowly crawled beside her, not knowing what else to do. His body was shaking badly, and the warmth from her side felt like heaven. They lay there not speaking, just breathing. As the hours passed, he noticed small details. She had a scar across her wrist, like a burn. Her breathing was soft and slow, like someone used to sleeping light outside. The wind howled louder. Ethan began to relax a little, finally warm again. Suddenly, she sat up alert. Her ears twitched. Yes, she had ears like small fins on the side of her head. She whispered something he didn't understand, then reached for a wooden spear near the wall. Ethan sat up too, his heart racing. "What is it?" he whispered. The alien girl made a motion with her hand fingers clawing downwards. Then she whispered one word in broken English: "Predator." That's when Ethan heard it. A low growl outside the cave, deep and angry. Heavy steps crushed the snow, coming closer. The girl blew out the tiny light they had made from glowing mushrooms. Darkness fell, and the cave became silent. Ethan held his breath, gripping a sharp rock he found beside him. The steps got closer, and then scratching. Right at the entrance, he could see the girl's violet eyes glowing faintly in the dark. She looked calm, like this wasn't the first time. Ethan, on the other hand, felt his heart pounding out of his chest. The scratching stopped, the sound of sniffing, growling, and then silence. Minutes passed like hours. Finally, the creature moved away, its growls fading into the wind. The alien girl sighed quietly and laid back down. Ethan stayed awake, staring at the entrance. He had many questions, but no energy to ask them. She had saved him not once, but twice. He looked at her one more time as she pulled the fur over them both. Maybe she was more than just an alien girl. Maybe she was the only reason he'd survived this place, and maybe, just maybe, this cold. Deadly Planet had given him a strange kind of warmth after all. Ethan opened his eyes to silence. The cave was dim, with a faint blue glow from the mushrooms tucked into the walls. He could feel warmth against his side. The alien girl was still beside him. He hadn't frozen to death. That alone felt like a miracle. She stirred beside him, her eyes slowly opening. They didn't speak, but something passed between them, a silent understanding. She stood and stepped toward the cave entrance, barefoot and light. Her movements were quiet, practiced, like someone used to danger. Ethan sat up, still wrapped in the shared fur blanket. His breath fogged in the air, but the cold didn't bite like before. Outside, the wind had slowed, but the snow still fell. He watched her sniff the air just beyond the curtain of moss and skin that covered the entrance. Then she froze, her shoulders stiff. Ethan rose, moving slowly. She turned and whispered something, but he didn't understand her words. Her eyes were locked on the ground. Ethan followed her gaze and saw it, a single mark in the snow, just outside the cave. It wasn't a footprint. Not exactly. It was wide, heavy, with sharp claw grooves dragging behind. The alien girl drew a shape in the snow inside the cave. It looked like a creature with too many legs and one large mouth. Then she whispered again, her voice low and shaky. "Hunter beast." Ethan swallowed hard. Whatever had come during the night hadn't gone far. He grabbed a metal shard from his broken cum, gripping it like a knife. She saw and nodded once, her face tight with fear. Without another word, she grabbed her spear and started moving deeper into the cave. Ethan followed, unsure of what they'd find. The cave opened into a second chamber, then a third. Strange bones lined the walls, picked clean and white. Some were too big to be animals. He didn't ask. He didn't want to know. At the far end was a small tunnel leading upward. The girl motioned him through it. It was tight, almost too small for him, but he squeezed through, the air growing colder again. Finally, they came out into another hidden ledge overlooking the forest far below, trees bent under snow. Something moved down there large, fast, and silent. The alien girl crouched, watching. Ethan did the same, heart racing. She didn't blink as the creature passed beneath the trees. It had long limbs, a back covered in armored plates, and eyes that glowed red even in daylight. Ethan gasped softly. The alien girl put a finger to her lips. Then, after a long while, the creature vanished into the forest. She finally let out a breath, one that had been trapped for minutes. They stayed there until the light dimmed. When they climbed back down into the main cave, the girl started working quickly. She pulled pieces of metal and bones from a hidden spot and began shaping something. Ethan watched, confused. She pointed to the entrance and made a snapping gesture with her hands. A trap. She was building a trap. Ethan joined her, using wires from his emergency kit and old scraps from his cum. Together, they built something simple but deadly. Spikes, tension, a trigger made from a bottle cap. They set it just outside the cave where the snow was soft. And then, once again, they waited. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He lay beside her in the sleeping bag, wide-eyed and tense. The alien girl rested her head near his shoulder. Her breathing was slow, peaceful even with danger so close. He envied her calm. The cave was silent, except for the sound of the wind. Returning then, suddenly, a loud snap echoed through the ice. Both of them sat up at once. Something had triggered the trap. Ethan grabbed his metal shard and crawled toward the entrance. The girl followed, spear in hand outside. In the blue light of the snow, the trap had gone off. The metal spike was covered in thick black blood. But whatever it had hit was already gone. They both scanned the dark trees. Nothing moved. But the sense of danger grew stronger. The girl picked up a broken scale from the ground, sharp as glass. She showed it to him. "Not dead," she whispered. Angry now, Ethan looked at the shadows beyond the snow. He realized something that chilled him worse than the cold ever had. The beast hadn't come to eat. It had come to study, and it would be back. Ethan woke to silence, but something felt wrong. His hands were cold, the shared blanket was missing. He looked around the cave, heart already beating faster. The alien girl was gone. He stood quickly, stepping over scattered bones and moss. Her spear was missing too. The cave entrance had a streak of black blood across the wall. He ran outside without thinking, his boots slipping on the ice. The snow had been disturbed, something large had passed through, and beside the deep clawed tracks there was a trail of red. Not the thick, dark blood of the beast. This blood was brighter, fresher. Ethan's stomach turned cold again. She had gone out there, alone. He followed the trail down the icy slope. Wind burning his face, his breath came in short bursts, clouding his vision. Every few steps he found drops of blood, a broken piece of fur, a smashed footprint. And then, far below, near a half-frozen stream, he saw movement. The girl was there, on one knee, her spear broken in two. The beast loomed above her. Jaws wide, limbs twitching, it was bigger than he remembered. Covered in ice armor plates, its red eyes locked on her, tail slicing the air like a whip. She stood between the monster and a smaller cave. Maybe she was hiding something inside, or maybe she was just too proud to run. Ethan didn't think, he just moved. He grabbed a flare from his pocket, the last one he had. He slid down the hill fast, scraping his palms on ice and stone. The alien girl turned her head as he charged forward. Her eyes widened, but she didn't call out. The beast turned toward Ethan, sensing new heat. With one motion, Ethan clicked the flare and threw it with all his strength. The flare exploded in red fire, blinding light flashing into the creature's eyes. It screamed, high and sharp, clawing at its face. The alien girl used that second to act. She stabbed upward with the sharp half of her broken spear. The blade cut deep under one of the armor plates. Black blood sprayed across the snow. The beast howled again and staggered back. Ethan grabbed a metal rod from the ground and charged. He slammed it into the beast's side, again and again. It turned, swiped at him, barely missing. The alien girl threw a rock, hitting the creature in the mouth. Together, they forced it to back off, step by heavy step. Finally, with one final screech, the beast turned and ran into the forest. It disappeared into the snow-covered trees. The girl fell to her knees, holding her side. Ethan rushed to her, kneeling beside her in the red-stained snow. Her arm was bleeding badly, her breathing fast and shallow, without thinking. He tore a piece of cloth from his sleeve and wrapped her arm. She didn't stop him, didn't move away. She just looked at him with those violet eyes. Soft now, not scared, not guarded, just tired. Ethan helped her stand. They walked back slowly, step by step. She leaned on him the whole way. Neither of them said a word. Back in the cave, she lay down without protest. He built a weak fire using scraps and dry roots from a hidden pile. The warmth was poor, but it was something. He sat beside her, watching the flames dance. After a while, her hand reached out and touched his. Just for a second, then pulled back. He didn't move, didn't speak. But inside, something heavy shifted. She had saved him by sharing her warmth. He had saved her by running toward danger. And now, they were both marked by the same blood. Not just hers, not just the beast's, but something deeper: trust. Outside, the snow fell again, soft and slow. But inside the cave, there was no fear, only quiet breathing. The crackle of weak fire, and two hearts, closer than before. Neither knew what tomorrow would bring, but they both knew, tonight, they had each other. Ethan found her staring at the stars. She was sitting outside the cave now. Even with her arm wrapped in cloth, the wind had calmed, and the night sky above was wide and full of slow-moving moons. She didn't look at him as he stepped beside her, but she held something in her hand, something she had hidden until now. It was a small crystal, glowing faint blue, wires wrapped around it, and it hummed softly. She handed it to him without a word. He held it in his palm, confused. Then suddenly, the crystal pulsed, and a soft human voice echoed from it. "This is Research Station Theta. Transmitting final log," the voice said. Ethan's blood froze. The voice belonged to a man from Earth. The alien girl watched him carefully. The message continued. "We regret our actions," the voice said. "We were told this species had no intelligence. They begged us to stop." Ethan looked up from the crystal, his heart heavy. The girl took it back gently and pointed to herself. She then pointed out toward the forest and made a motion, a sharp chopping gesture. Over and over again, Ethan understood. Humans had been here before, and they had hurt her people. She spoke slowly now, her words broken but clear enough. "Humans came, took many, used," she whispered, voice like the wind. Her hand trembled as she pointed at the scars on her arms. Ethan wanted to speak, but no words came. He turned and walked back into the cave. He pulled out what was left of his communicator. It was damaged, cracked, but part of the system still blinked with life. He connected the wires and powered it with a small battery from his suit. The signal was weak, but he got a ping. A passing human ship was close enough to hear. He looked back at the cave entrance where the girl sat quietly. He could call for rescue, and maybe be off this cold planet in hours. He could go home, but what would happen to her if humans came again? He sat there, staring at the blinking light. Then he typed a short message. "Survivor found. Recommend medical pickup. No weapons. Local species present." He paused. Then added one more line. "Do not harm." The message was sent. He shut the device off before he could change his mind. Outside, the girl still stared at the sky. He walked out and sat beside her again. The stars reflected in her eyes, and for the first time she looked peaceful. He pointed at himself. "Ethan," he said. She nodded. "Leary," she replied. They sat there in silence, two names in the snow. The night passed slowly, and somewhere above, a ship was now coming. Ethan didn't know if they would listen, but he had to believe someone would. Back inside the cave, he found her device again. He replayed the human voice, again and again. Each time, the words struck him harder. "We were told this species had no intelligence. They begged us to stop." He understood now why she had hesitated to help him. He saw her pain, her fear, and still, she had shared her warmth. Still, she had fought beside him. Still, she had not run when he reached out. Ethan stood by the mouth of the cave, eyes on the sky, somewhere above. People like him were getting his message. And if they came with kindness, things might change. But if they came with weapons, then he'd stand beside her, not against her. The snow started again, light flakes landing on his hair. He didn't brush them off. He just stood there, waiting, watching the horizon with the weight of 2 lives in his chest. Asterisk. The sound came before the sight, a low hum in the sky. Like a beast of metal stirring in the clouds, Ethan looked up, and so did Leary. Her eyes narrowed, her body tense like she could smell danger in the air. A ship was coming, but it didn't blink its lights or send a message. It came fast, cutting through the sky like a blade. Leary took a step back into the cave shadows. Ethan raised both hands to show her calm. But her trust was already cracking. He couldn't blame her. Not after what her people had faced before. Snow blew wild as the dropship descended. Its landing legs slammed into the ice, shaking the ground. The ramp dropped, steam and smoke pouring. Out from the fog, 4 figures stepped out. Dressed in black armor with tinted helmets, no badges, no names, just weapons. Ethan walked out slowly, hands raised high. "Survivor," one of them said through a helmet speaker. "Name and rank." He gave both, then quickly added, "There's a native here. Injured, peaceful, do not engage." The soldier didn't respond. Just turned his head to the others. They began spreading out, walking toward the trees with their weapons drawn. Ethan stepped in front of them, blocking their path. "I said she's not a threat," he said louder this time. The lead soldier raised a hand and pushed him aside like he was nothing. Another soldier spoke coldly. "Command wants the species checked for signs of higher cognition." Ethan's fists clenched. "She has a name," he growled. The soldier didn't care. He pressed a button on his belt, and a scanning drone lifted into the air. It buzzed toward the cave, glowing red. Leary had already hidden deeper inside, but the drone was fast. Ethan ran after it, stumbling on ice. He caught up just as it hovered at the entrance of the cave. Leary was crouched in the back, spear in hand, eyes wild with fear. "Don't!" Ethan shouted. Standing between the drone and her, "She's not an animal." The drone scanned them both. Beeping and flashing, the soldiers arrived seconds later, weapons aimed. Leary stood up slowly. Not in fear but defiance, she stepped beside Ethan and lifted her chin. One soldier whispered, "It's communicating." Another lifted his gun. Ethan stepped in front of her, rage boiling in his chest. "You shoot, and I swear you'll answer to more than just me." For a moment, the wind was the only sound. Then the commander lowered his weapon. He turned toward the drone and studied its readout. "She registers neural complexity equal to human levels," he said. "Language patterns confirmed." Ethan felt a small breath of hope. But then the commander continued, "Mark her for off-world transfer." Leary flinched at the words, not needing a translator to understand. Ethan grabbed the commander's arm. "She's not going anywhere." The commander looked down at Ethan's hand, then back up. "She's not your pet, Marine," he said flatly. "She's evidence." Leary stepped forward. Standing shoulder to shoulder with Ethan, her voice was soft but steady. "Not leave," she said. The soldiers raised their weapons again. Ethan moved fast, grabbing the drone mid-air and smashing it on a rock. Sparks flew. The soldiers shouted. Leary took Ethan's hand, and they ran, back into the forest, back into the cold. Bullets cut through trees. Lights danced behind them, but they didn't stop. They didn't slow. Side by side, they vanished into the dark, hunted once again. The night forest swallowed them whole. Snow fell like feathers, soft but endless. Ethan's lungs burned with every step, but he didn't stop, not with Leary beside him. Not with armed soldiers chasing them through the cold. The light from the soldiers' scanners flickered behind the trees, but the forest was thick here, full of winding paths and steep drops. Leary moved with the grace of someone who had walked this land her whole life. She pulled Ethan behind fallen logs, under icy ledges, across frozen streams, and when they could no longer run, she led him to a cave deep in the roots of a black tree. Inside, it was narrow, almost too small for two. Ethan collapsed to the ground, chest heaving. Leary crouched beside him, watching the entrance with sharp, alert eyes. A distant shout echoed through the woods. The soldiers were still searching, but they were moving farther now. They sat in silence for a long time. Then Ethan finally whispered, "We can't keep running forever." Leary looked at him, her face tired but steady. She reached under her fur collar and pulled out something small. It was a carved stone pendant with strange symbols on it. She pressed it into his hand. "Home," she said, pointing to the symbol. Then she pointed to the sky. Ethan stared at it, understanding dawning. "There's a place they won't follow?" he asked. She nodded. Far north, beyond the ice cliffs, was a sanctuary, not just for her, but for others like her, refugees from human greed. Survivors hiding in the last untouched corner of the planet. It was far, and it was dangerous, but it was a place where she could be safe, where maybe they both could be safe. Ethan wrapped the pendant into his fist and looked into her eyes. "Then that's where we go." Leary gave a small nod, the first sign of hope on her face in days. They waited until dawn, then moved again, avoiding open ground, crossing cliffs, drinking melted snow. Days passed in silence, broken only by small words they both now understood. Food, sleep, watch, safe. The forest became a silent teacher, and Leary its guide. But peace didn't last. On the fourth day, a small drone flew above the trees, scanning with red light. They hid under ice, but it saw the heat of Ethan's breath. It sent a signal, and an hour later, the sound of engines returned. Soldiers came down in smaller transports this time. They were not looking to talk. They carried nets, tranquilizers, and stun rounds. Not for him, but for her. Leary was the target. Now Ethan knew it, and so did she. They stood at the edge of a deep ravine. Behind them, the soldiers closed in. In front of them, the cliff dropped into mist. Cold and deep, she turned to him, placed her hand on his cheek. "Go," she whispered. He shook his head hard. "No," he said, voice shaking. "You saved me first, remember?" She pushed him back gently. He grabbed her wrist, but then, without warning, a shot rang out. A stun round hit Leary in the leg, and she fell with a cry. Ethan roared and ran forward, grabbing her before she slipped down the cliff. Another shot grazed his shoulder, but he didn't stop. He pulled her into his arms and ran straight into the fog below. Together, they disappeared into the cold white air. The soldiers shouted, but no one followed. There was only wind and falling, and then nothing. Ethan awoke to the sound of water dripping. He was lying on cold stone, his body aching. Above him, dim blue light glowed from the walls. Beside him, Leary was still, her eyes closed, her breathing shallow but steady. They had survived the fall. Barely, the ravine had led them into a deep cavern, hidden from sky and signal. The ice above was too thick for drones to scan through. No soldiers, no footsteps, no voices, only quiet and the slow heartbeat of the underground. Ethan sat up with a groan and checked Leary's leg. The stun round had left a bruise, but she was healing. He wrapped it tighter with cloth and melted ice over a heat crystal they found. When she opened her eyes, she smiled weakly. She was still. Here, they stayed in the cave for a day, maybe two. Ethan had lost track of time. But Leary kept looking north, deeper into the tunnels. The sanctuary she had spoken of it was still ahead. She could feel it. They moved again, slower this time. The tunnels stretched for miles beneath the planet's crust, sometimes narrow, sometimes wide. Once they passed glowing trees growing from rock. Another time, they saw lights flicker far ahead and vanish. Watchers maybe, or ghosts then. One morning, light found them, real light sunlight, pouring down from an opening above. They climbed up carefully, helping each other with each step. When they reached the surface again, the world had changed. They were standing in a valley of green and gold. Snow still clung to the edges, but warm winds moved through the trees. Strange animals ran in the distance, free and unafraid. And at the center of it all, towers, carved from wood and stone, rising from the hills. Ethan stared in awe. People were there, aliens like Leary, tall, graceful, marked with the same quiet strength. They looked up as the two travelers approached, and they smiled. Leary limped forward, her people rushing to meet her. Some cried. Others touched her face gently. She turned and looked at Ethan, her eyes full of something deep, a kind of peace that only comes after pain. They brought Ethan food, water, and warm blankets. No one asked who he was. No one feared him. They only saw the man who had stood beside her when others came to chain her. And that was enough. Days passed and the sky turned blue again. Leary's leg healed, and her laugh returned. Ethan stayed near her, helping build shelters and hunt for food. He didn't ask when the humans would return, because deep inside, he no longer wanted to be found. One evening, as stars lit the sky, Leary sat beside him with two sleeping rolls. She opened hers and patted the space beside her, same as the very first night. Only now, her smile came first. Ethan laughed softly and lay beside her. Their hands brushed, then stayed. The stars watched silently, and the cold, cruel world felt far away, not because it had changed, but because they had. They had faced death, betrayal, and fear, and through it all, they had chosen something rare, not survival, but each other.